go. All right. So we are dealing with chapter 18 this week. And the readings actually start on Saturday, the 13th. And it's one of those split weeks again. And actually, I think we'll get into chapter 19. Let's get into chapter 19 this week because it's a shorter chapter. Yep, Saturday, first part of chapter 19. Anyway, so the major focus of this week's reading is Paul's time in Corinth, and then this really quick travelogue of the rest of his journey home, and actually then starting up missionary journey number 3. So it's interesting how I find it interesting how Luke sort of dives in real deep on some certain places and then just like skims over.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know exactly what's going on there. Maybe they just, nothing, crazy happened, nothing really dramatic happened in those places. Obviously he's going to spend a long time talking about the boat ride, from to Rome, obviously, and there's several chapters there when he's on the boat, but it's just for half the chapter to be Corinth, and here's everything else. So hey, there's Gary.
Yeah, better quit talking about me now.
All righty.
We're wondering if your doctor's appointment got canceled or.
Oh, I couldn't get into Zoom for some reason this morning.
Oh, sorry about that.
But yeah, we didn't even try going to Rockwall. We couldn't even get anybody to answer the phone over there.
Because they didn't want to go anywhere either.
Yeah.
Very good. No, I was just doing a quick overview of chapter 18, where, half of the chapter is Corinth, and then the other half of the chapter is this very quick travelogue of the rest of the journey, missionary journey number 2, and jumping into missionary journey number 3, along about verse 23 or so. 23, 24. So, all right. So Paul goes from Athens to Corinth, which is it's a little less than 50 miles between between Athens and Corinth. And it's across the Isthmus of Corinth. It's about a 3-mile wide strip of land that back then, so let's see. Let me grab. Hold on. I found most of the maps that I found were just like, this is not great. So I went to, I think I finally went to Google Earth, and yeah, that was not good. Hold on. Let me zoom this out just a hair. All right. Now I got to go back here and share my screen. There and there. Okay, so this is Google Earth, so Corinth is right here. This is the modern city of Corinth, and ancient Corinth. Oh, let's zoom in. Hold on. So this is ancient Corinth right here. So so this is where Paul would have been, down here. Let's see. I'm gonna move this out of the way. So if I pop this open, it'll spin around. Sorry, don't get sick on me. And so you can see the pictures. So this is ruins of a temple. I think that's Apollos. And so you can see sort of the ancient ruins here. There's another. I think there were somewhere I read there was 38 columns in this, but only 7 are left. Again, just sort of the ancient ruins there in Corinth. All right, I'll come back to the map. It's spinning, so hold on. I'll stop it from spinning. All right, let me move it all again. zoom out ever so slightly. All right. A little bit more. Okay. All right. So again, so the map has reoriented itself. Here's ancient Corinth. Here's modern day Corinth. No, stop that. I just want to move. All right. It's not going to let me do that. Let me come over here. This one's going to be better. This one will let me zoom in and zoom out. All right. Okay. So this is oriented with north at the top of the screen. So this is the Aegean Sea. This is the Adriatic Sea. So what would happen is that, and Athens is this way. So this is the isthmus over here. So Athens is off the screen here, and he would have come this way to Corinth. So what would happen is that, hold on. I'm gonna move this real quick. Hold on, no, I want to hold, and there we go. Okay. See if I can get all the way over. Okay, so there's Athens. And so he would have come this way, and he would have come to Corinth this way. So, so the one of the best things about Corinth in the ancient world is that they basically controlled both sides of this land strip right here. And so they could have ships coming into the Gulf here, this Saronic Gulf, and come right up here. And there was, in ancient times, it was basically a big long wooden railroad track, essentially, that they would drag the ships from one side of the isthmus to the other. And so they could come in from this direction, they would get dragged across the 3 miles of land here, and then out into the Adriatic Sea, and then they could find their way to Italy, and then points farther west. So when, let's see, zoom back in. So this side, so there's a reference in verse 18. It says at Cenchreae, I don't know, I think that's how you say it. I'll just make it up. At Cenchreae, he had his hair cut, for he was under a vow. That is this southern part of the isthmus. It's actually right here. So right here would have been where Paul would have had his hair cut, and then he would have gotten on a ship here, bound for, he ends up going to Ephesus and then back to Holy Land. So this was the southern port of entry, and this isthmus. So right now, you can actually, the boats can actually go all the way through. There's a canal that was dug in the 19th century, so gas stations. There's a fast track right there. It's a gas station. Oh. Yeah, another gas station. Anyway, so now there's a trench. And apparently, even like several Roman emperors tried to accomplish this project, and including Nero. Anyway, they couldn't get it done until the 19th century. But then on the other side is the town of, what's it called? It starts with an L. Latium, I think is, there it is. This is the town on the north side. Latium, sure, let's go with that. So that's the other side. So there's Cenchreae on one side, Latium on the other side. And those are the two entry and exit points. So there you go. All right. Let's go. I'll go back on here. I'll zoom out again. So again, here's ancient Corinth, modern day Corinth. and then this strip of land right there. Okay, so the thing about Corinth is that it is an incredibly cosmopolitan city for this very reason, that there were traders and sailors and merchants and all kinds of people that would come through this particular town because they were right here, you know, on this small strip of land where people from the west and the east could come together on the sea routes, but then also north and south on the land routes. So there, it was just this bustling community. And I think, I'm pretty sure N.T. Wright said that basically the Corinth was, says it was the largest and most cosmopolitan city of Greece, somewhere about 750,000 people. Anyway, oh, and so then in this, in Tony Merida's commentary on Acts, he says, he quotes, he cites Tim Keller, the pastor from New York. He says that Athens was like Boston. It was an intellectual center. Corinth was like New York City, a commercial center. And he goes on to say Ephesus was like Los Angeles, a popular culture and occult center. And Rome was like Washington, D.C. It was the political center. So if you can kind of think of those four cities and how they function nowadays, so Corinth, Ephesus, Athens, Corinth, Ephesus, and then Rome. That's how those cities function. Okay. So what essentially happens is when Paul is in Corinth, he's sort of at the crossroads of all of this trade, all of these people, and finds himself preaching the gospel to people who have you know, all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of habits and practices, some that are, you know, not so great, and some that might be might be good, but he does find a Jewish community, and two of those people that are Jewish that he finds are Aquila and Priscilla, also known as Prisca. Later on, if you find a reference to Prisca, that's this lady as well. And they are tent makers. And so Paul hooks up with them because he's a tent maker as well. We learn that right here in Acts 18. And we find out that they're in Corinth because they've been kicked out of Rome by Claudius. So the Emperor Claudius issued the Edict of Claudius, and it basically was in response, as best I can tell, it was in response to this sort of uprising and some riots in Rome around this character named Chrestos, which is, most scholars think that it's a Latin transliteration for Christos, which is the Greek form of Messiah, the anointed one. So they think that already, that's fine, even in the early 50s AD, that there is the message of Christ finding its way to Rome already. Now, that's you know, we can't really, we don't really have verification from that particular time period about the gospel getting that far yet, but for whatever reason, Claudius gets spooked, and so he sends all the Jews, or at least most of the Jews, out from Rome. And while we're not going to get to Romans in you know, in this particular series, when you read Romans, and when your folks read Romans, you'll see this, you'll see Paul addressing the Jew-Gentile issue from a standpoint of, for at least a number of years, the church in Rome was largely Gentiles because all the Jews had been, been sent away. But then once, excuse me, once Nero takes over, he disregards the edict of Claudius and lets the Jews back in. And so then all these believing Jews come back to Rome because that was their home. And they find this church that started, and they have to deal with the whole, Jewish Gentile issues all over again. So the Book of Romans deals with that quite a bit. Just read chapters 9 through 11 in Romans, and you'll see it just right. It's on every page. It's in every sentence of those 3 chapters. All right. So that's the Edict of Claudius. That's why Aquila and Priscilla are in Corinth. And then verse 4 tells us that every Sabbath he would argue in the synagogue and try to convince the Jews and Greeks. And so he's picked up his old pattern of going to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. As we'll see in just a minute, he again gets met with mixed results. Okay. So before I jump into that, are there any questions that y'all have about the first few verses there, the Edict of Claudius, anything like that? Anything about Corinth as a
just to comment, as we go through this, it became more and more obvious that Christianity was considered a sect within Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be kind of fortuitous in that they always got treated the same way as the Jews. The Jews had the special coverage, protection, if you will, saying
right.
They're an accepted religion, so the Christians got that same protection, basically.
Right. Yeah, we'll see that play out in when Gallio comes down.
Gallio.
And he will. He basically says, if you think about it, Christianity becomes legal, at least in southern Greece at that particular moment, because he makes an exception for them in the same way that they've made an exception for the Jews. So it just becomes this secondary, like, oh, look at that. So I don't know if he meant to do that, but that's what it ends up happening. All right. All right. So then when we turn to verse 5, so now we're looking at Monday, the 15th. Silas and Timothy arrive. Remember that Paul sent for them when he was in Athens. And so now they arrive from Macedonia. And Paul is busy. He's proclaiming the word, testifying to the Jews that the Messiah was Jesus. When they oppose him and revile him, in protest, he shook the dust from his clothes and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." So go ahead.
Excuse me, but where was Timothy before this?
So Timothy, until Paul picked him up in Lystra, he was living in Lystra. And so Timothy came with Paul and Silas at that point, and they went to, they went to Philippi, and then they went down through Thessalonica and Berea. And then they stayed in Berea while at the end of 16, while Paul went to Athens. And when he got to Athens, he sent word back with the guys who rode on the boat with him to send Silas and Timothy to him as soon as possible. That's at the end of 16, or the beginning of 17. And so now they've received that word and made their way, and they found him. My guess is they went to Athens first, and the believers there said, "Oh no, he went on to Corinth," which again is only 50 miles away, so it was probably another couple of days overland to get there.
Okay.
So yes, that's where they were. They were still in Berea prior to this, which is so Macedonia is northern Greece and Achaia is southern Greece. That's the two different. I mean, there's multiple provinces. Those, but Macedonia is in northern Greece, Achaia is in southern Greece, which is where Athens and Corinth are. Okay. So when the Jews in Corinth reject the message, then he says, your blood be on your own heads. I'm innocent. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. So he says, okay, I tried. You know, it's my pattern to go Jew first, then to the Gentiles. You guys have rejected it. So now we're going to go, now I'm going to go to the Gentiles. And here's the crazy thing. It's not like he goes across town or to the next town. He goes next door, basically. So he left the synagogue and he went to the house of a man named Titius Justus, and his house was next door to the synagogue. I mean, like within shouting distance. I mean, let's see, N.T. Wright in his lecture, this wasn't in the book, this is in a lecture that he gave on this. He says, the very geography of this scene shows how cheerfully tactless Paul is. He went on to say that if it was him in that particular situation and somebody offered him a home that he could minister out of, he'd be like, can we find one that's across town and not so much in the face of where I just got reviled? But Paul's just like, nope, we're gonna do it, and here we go. But then he has something fortuitous happen. The first, not the first fortuitous thing, but in the series of this. So Crispus, the official of the synagogue, so this is the synagogue leader from next door, became a believer together with all of his household, and many of the Corinthians who had heard Paul became believers and were baptized. So all of a sudden, he's got this moment in time where he's preached to the Jews. Many of them have rejected him, so he goes to a Gentile's home, but he's a God-fearer. And he becomes a believer. This Crispus, or Titius Justus, he's a worshiper of God. He goes to his house next door to the synagogue, and then the synagogue leader sort of comes around and goes, "Hey, I like what you have to say." And the synagogue leader would have been the one, as I did some research, they're the one who would choose the readings. They were the one who would select the speakers in the synagogue and vet their messages, make sure that things were done in worship the way that they were supposed to be done in worship. I mean, it would be like the rabbi from the local Jewish temple going, to the Christian church next door and being like, you know what, I think I'm going to do this now. And then all the people would kind of be like, now what do we do? Because there's no point person essentially. So anyway, so Crispus becomes a believer, his whole household does, and then many people in Corinth become believers and are baptized. So here's the beginning of the Corinthian church right here. And it's right next door. It's born right next door to the synagogue. So then Paul has this vision of the Lord. Don't be afraid to speak and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you or harm you. For there are many in this city who are my people. And he stayed there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. And so, again, when we're following this pattern along, or following this journey, specifically this one, we see that typically he has not spent very much time in any one of these places. And all of a sudden, he's going to spend 18 months in one particular place. We've seen that, so here he has a vision of stay from the Lord. And then, in the earlier part of the journey, he had the vision, to go to Macedonia, but also the Spirit had spoken and said, don't go through Asia and then don't go to Bithynia. You got to end up this way. So you just see this layer upon layer of the journey that he's on is not mapped out in its entirety. It's almost, it feels like an almost moment by moment revelation of where do I go next and how long do I stay here. It reminds me of a couple of things. One, it reminds me of I just finished reading through the latter part of the book of Exodus, and how the people of God, as they come out, they cross the Red Sea and they find themselves on the Sinai Peninsula. They follow day by day, the cloud by day and the fire by night. And if the cloud goes, they go. And if the fire goes, they go. But if the cloud stays, they stay. And they set up shop and they stay there until the fire moves. And it's like, they live in this, daily bread kind of existence, obviously, manna, quail, place. And that seems to be what Paul's doing here as well, is that, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to keep walking this direction. I'm like, it seems good to us. Remember, all the way back in Antioch at the beginning of chapter 16, it was Paul and Barnabas. They're like, let's go visit all those places we've been. And they're like, all right, this is good. And they go. And when they get, a few weeks into the journey, the Spirit says, no, not this way. So they go another way. And they're like, no, not this way. So they go another way. And then they're like, here's a vision, go this way. And so it reminds me of, the wilderness and the people of God who are going through that desert, through that wilderness time. They're following, if the cloud moves, pack up the tabernacle and we go. And if not, we stay here. It also reminds me of the fact that our lives right now are, I don't think like I've said this before, I don't think I've ever had more than 1 or 2 steps of what's coming next and what do I do next, revealing. I think one of the downfalls in humanity, at least nowadays, is like, it's like, I want the next 10 years just mapped out.
Yeah.
And like, let's just, like, give me the GPS directions of everything that's going to happen from here till 2031. And it's like, that's not the way it ever works for anybody. We can, then there's my favorite sarcastic spiritual quote of, we make plans and God laughs kind of thing, says, ha ha ha, watch what I'll do now, anyway. So it's this confirmation for Paul that there is work to be done right here in Corinth. And again, it's at the crossroads of land trade and sea trade. And, if it really does have, 750,000 people there, in that general area, then the potential is huge for the spread of the gospel. Because anybody that gets on a boat headed in either direction, anybody that takes off in a caravan headed in any direction, can take the good news with them, and share along the way and share wherever they go. And it's just anyway. So, but that doesn't mean that Corinth was an easy place to be in ministry. There's a reason there's 2 letters to the Corinthian church. They had their issues. So they had their issues, but he stays there for 1 year and 6 months teaching the word of God. All right. I'll stop and take a breath there if you have a question or comment. Okay. All right. We'll pick up in verse 12. So Gallio was proconsul of Achaia. And so he's so now he's the new Roman tribunal or Roman proconsul governor, essentially, in this area. And so they try to bring Paul up on charges. This man is persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to the law. So this sounds familiar to other places like Philippi, Thessalonica. And it's, it's like Paul's like, okay, I'm gonna get ready. He's like, I'm gonna ramp up and I'm gonna defend myself. Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio said to the Jews, if this were a matter of crime or serious villainy, I mean, if he murdered somebody or if there was theft or something happened in the temple that needed to be dealt with, I would be justified in accepting your complaint, the complaint of you Jews. But since it's a matter of questions about words and names and your own law, see to it yourself. He's like basically washing his hands of it. He's like, I'm not going to deal with this. So he dismisses them. They seize Sosthenes. So remember, Crispus walked away from his spot as the leader of the synagogue. A guy named Sosthenes is the new official in the synagogue. And basically they take out their anger on him. But Gallio paid no attention to any of these things. So basically, in a roundabout way, Gallio has not only re-emphasized the fact that the Jews don't have to, they have the exemption from worshiping the Roman or the Greek gods because of their own religious practices. But then additionally, he says that you two are close enough related to the Jews and now this Christian group of people are close enough related that I'm not going to deal with y'all. Y'all are going to have to figure that out, and I'm not going to make a ruling on it. So basically, he's like, at some level here, Christianity becomes a some kind of legal entity, at least in southern Greece at this point. So he wasn't going to make a big deal about that. All right. So in the lecture I watched on this chapter for N.T. Wright, he said he made the comment that perhaps Paul was thinking, oh, I sure wish I could have had something like this in Thessalonica or Philippi, where he had been prior. So anyway. Okay.
Dean,
Yep.
Excuse me, before you leave Tuesday,
Mhm.
Verse 17.
Yes.
I got a question in an email and I was supposed to ask you about this, so
Oh, very good.
bear with me.
No problem.
17, then all of them seized Sosthenes, the official of the synagogue. The question that the person had was, there are some translations that read, then the Greeks seized him. There's some that say like this, all of them. There's some that indicated a mob.
Right.
My response to that would be that it's a different translation. So what can you say? But do you have anything that documents more specifically who they were?
So let me see here. It appears that it was, let's see. It appears that it's leaning more towards the Greeks in that they're not happy with number one, the Jews being able to not worship the Greek deities in the same way that they do, but also then now there's this new group of sort of Jewish, sort of not Jewish people who are drawing Greeks away from their particular mode of religion. And so because because Gallio won't make a ruling and won't deal with it on his end, they're just going to do they're just going to take out their frustration on the Jews, and so they pick Sosthenes as the leader of the Jews in Corinth to take their frustration out on.
Okay.
Well, my study Bible says, that it's mostly the Jews or the Greeks, but then it says Jews beat their own synagogue ruler because he was unsuccessful in presenting their case. First, then it says probably the former, which is
Right.
not
Well,
clear. Greeks.
I mean, I guess you can. Yeah, it's one of those 6 to 1 and half a dozen of the other kind of
Yeah.
deal, where
Yeah.
it was probably a mix of both. There were, I would imagine there were Greeks that were unhappy with this ruling, and that there were Jews that were unhappy with the ruling. It seems odd that the Jews would beat up on their own brand new leader. Obviously, they cared about their community enough and their religious community enough to have already elected, and selected a new leader of the synagogue, because there's no mention of him prior to this. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just wondering. Go ahead.
Now, you mentioned that the Greeks might have been unhappy that they weren't being forced to worship the Greek gods. Would it been at that time? Would it have been Greek gods or the Roman gods?
It probably been both.
Okay. Okay.
Corinth is a Roman colony. It was destroyed by Rome several hundred years before this point in time, and then rebuilt as a Roman colony in 44 BC. So about 100 years before Paul gets there.
Okay.
Let's see. This is First Corinthians. Hold on. Look and see if there's any mention. Yeah. So so 1 Corinthians 1:1. Paul, called to be an apostle of Christ Jesus by the will of God, and our brother Sosthenes. So even the new Jewish official becomes a Christian. So I was like, I know I've heard that name before, and there it is. So anyway, just you might want to throw that little tidbit out there too. So,
Okay. Do you want to talk about the questions on this page now or later?
We can talk about them now if you want.
Well, I need help with both of them.
Okay.
As far as in the first one, is it just still? Well, it says a greater attack,
right?
And what are your thoughts on that particular question? Those two questions. Sure. Number one.
So, so the greater is in reference to the attack that they make back in verse 6, and when they revile him and they oppose him and revile him at Paul. So now they've come back and they're upping the level by going to the Roman authority and saying, this guy is saying, is persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to the law. So it's it's sort of like Gallio's sort of the Supreme Court kind of deal. They had the lower court, and the lower court didn't really do anything, and so they're up in the level, and they're saying, okay, you're the Roman authority. We're under the Roman Empire. So if anybody's going to make a ruling on this, it's going to be you. And he still, he washes his hands of it.
Yeah.
So do they actually? So again, they're still mad at what Paul's doing, but they don't really have a case against him that makes a difference to the empire. I mean, in an empire that has elevated their emperor to a deity status, I think as long as most of the people are taking their paying their bills and doing their
Or-
regular worship of the emperor, they can make an exception for this particular group of people, and then on they go.
Thank you.
So then, yeah, sure. And then we've kind of talked about Sosthenes as well, and mob rule.
But as far as impacting him negatively,
right. So obviously he's, he gets the crud beaten out of him. However, again, you can point them to 1 Corinthians 1, 1:1,
Right.
and see that while it was negative in the moment, he comes back around and he becomes a believer. So,
okay.
So yeah, in the moment, yes, it's negative because he got beat up for, I don't know, maybe it's just the second day on the job, and it's like, all right, guess what? It's like the new preacher coming to town and changing the worship order, and all of a sudden your email inbox is full and your calendar is full of appointments. Going, hey, wait a minute, not that that's happened to me. Oh, just my friends. That happens to me.
Yeah.
All right. Good times. Okay. We'll move on to Wednesday's reading. So here we go. So it says, after staying for a considerable time. So let's see. Yeah. So considerable time, it's that 1.5 year time frame in Corinth. Paul said farewell, and he sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. So the tent makers that he met back at the beginning of the chapter come with him. At Cenchrea, whatever we want to call it. I don't have to read this one on Sunday, so it's okay. He had his hair cut, for he was under a vow. That's an oddly specific detail to include in this moment, but I don't know. I don't know what that's about. And so they sail from Corinth to from Cenchrea to Ephesus. So they go across the Aegean Sea and find their way back to the west end of Asia. And he goes there, and he goes again to the synagogue and has discussion with the Jews. When they asked him to stay longer, he declined. So so this is his first trip to Ephesus. Remember, when on the way, when they were moving west, he wanted to go to Ephesus, then got sent north, and he's come around to the backside, and now they're headed east. And so now he's there. They ask him to stay longer, but he declines. And he says, I will return to you if God wills. And then he sets sail. And so they get back on the boat, and then they're actually heading for the Holy Land at that point. But Priscilla and Aquila stay in Ephesus at this point. And let's see. Yeah. So obviously there's something going on in Ephesus that he has some kind of success almost immediately, and then we'll see in just a couple of verses that he'll be back there. So he declines to stay. He says he will return, and then they set sail.
What are you trying to get everybody to realize in his second journey?
Okay.
Just obvious. I mean.
So yeah. So what's been accomplished is that Paul has he has continued with his pattern of Jew first and then to the Gentile. He has seen mixed results, that both Jewish people and Gentiles have come to faith. What's also happened is that he has set up these, the genesis of these churches in strategic places throughout the Mediterranean basin, that will be able to spread the gospel along the trade routes and along the travel routes that are inherent in these particular communities, not only in those communities, but then also to the rest of the world. So basically, he's planted the seeds of the gospel in Gentile communities, so that those Gentile communities will continue to reach the ends of the earth. So,
this might be a time to just share with you a comment out of my Bible regarding Priscilla and her husband. They're an example of what can happen through husband and wife. Their effectiveness together is the result of their good relationship with each other. Their hospitality opened the doorway of salvation to many. The Christian home is still one of the best tools for spreading the gospel.
there you go.
I just thought that was a really good statement.
That is really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And then, of course, just like Pastor Dean, the question becomes, do guests find Christ in your home?
I'll write that down. Make an appearance on Sunday.
Yeah, that'll end up at the end of one of his sermons now.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you go, that sounds familiar.
That's like, oh, yeah. And I'm gonna give you credit on that.
No, don't you dare. You can give it to the Life Application Bible, but
Oh, okay.
I just found it. I didn't say it.
Okay. So, very good. Excellent. No, that's a great point.
And I'll try to copy that page off because it's a whole thing
Okay.
on the two of them, and I'll try to get a copy sent to you.
That'd be great.
Would you want one, Sandy?
I would. I'd love it. Yep.
Okay, I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So, so then we come to the, so verse 22 is the turning point between missionary journey number 2 and missionary journey number 3. So they land at Caesarea. He goes up to Jerusalem, greets the church there, and then he goes to Antioch. And again, Luke has his geography, a little mixed up here because Antioch is north of Jerusalem, so they don't go down there. But anyway, Gary had something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I read this in NT Wright or no, it was somewhere else. In England, people always go up to London. No matter where they are in the country, they go up to London.
Okay.
Figure of
And
speech.
figure of speech.
Uh-huh.
And so everybody seems to go up to Jerusalem also.
Okay.
It's a way of thinking about it being the primary place.
I like it. Very good. Okay. All right. Okay.
I've been looking at Adam Clark's stuff from back in the 1700s, and it might have been in there, but it also could be in the Enduring Word pages that I look at every now and then.
Good deal. So he goes down to Antioch. After spending some time there, he departed and went from place to place through the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. So basically he's, so now he's turned the corner back to go west, and he's going all the, he's probably making stops in Lystra and Derbe, and, maybe even stopped over in Tarsus and, saw his mom and dad, or, they were still alive. But then makes his way, through the places that he's gone before, strengthening the disciples.
Why do you ask? Why does he go to Jerusalem?
Well, so I would think that he goes to Jerusalem because the last time he was there was at the end of 15 when they had the council. So my guess is he would go there to report, hey, I shared this letter all the way through here. And by the way, I got all the way to Corinth, and, Jews and Gentiles alike have come to faith. And, there's the gospel has gotten all the way there now. And maybe even if, because he was so connected with Priscilla and Aquila, he maybe even has insight into what the gospel, if the gospel has already reached to Rome, which then comes up later in his desire to get to Rome. That's his ultimate goal, is to get to Rome. He ends up there not the way that he thought he'd get there, but he gets there. So anyway.
It's a shame you didn't have GPS.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just had the stars. They had God's positioning system, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a bad preacher joke. The bad preacher joke. So anyway.
What? Are you going to use it?
No.
Open that door.
Right, yeah. Maybe. Anyway.
I like that.
I know. It's so yeah, so he's there. It'd be great. Yeah, if he had GPS, then it'd be great. All right. So he goes to Jerusalem, report on all the things he's done, and he heads back to Galatia and Phrygia to strengthen the churches there. And then at the end of the chapter, we see he finds himself in, or we see the story, or the beginnings of narrative about Apollos. And Apollos will come up in a couple of letters, I think in Ephesians and maybe Corinthians as well. Don't quote me on that. So obviously Ephesians, because that's where he is. But so there's a Jew named Apollos who's from Alexandria, that's in Africa. And he was an eloquent man, well versed in the scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with burning enthusiasm and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, so this is how we know that Priscilla and Aquila stayed in Ephesus. When they heard him, they took him aside and explained the way of God to him more accurately. And when he wished to cross over to Acacia, the believers encouraged him and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. On his arrival, he greatly helped those who through grace had become believers, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that I think I'm missing some words there. Oh man.
Yeah,
thought
you left off
That the Messiah
did.
is Jesus. Oh my goodness.
I read that to Don, and he goes, "What's missing?" I
Yeah.
said, "Well,
Jesus is missing. Ah! Sorry. Okay, that the Messiah is Jesus. Oof.
We'll see if the class catches that, because they
Right.
missed that. 23 missing.
Missing the missing
Fortunately.
the F.
Yeah. Well, they did. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Woof. All right.
Did Paul ever meet Apollos at this point?
I
Not
don't
that
know
it
the answer to
says,
that
I guess.
question. I know that he obviously knows about him, but I don't know if they've actually, like, if they ever met face to face. I can keep looking that up.
Well, it kind of, knowing that would explain one of the questions over on Saturday, but since we don't know for sure, the first question on Saturday, I think, why would Paul think to ask that question about the Holy Spirit to those disciples? And if,
Well, but
if he had
you,
already, go ahead.
if you read on in 19,
Yeah.
you know, that he took the road through the interior and arrived at Ephesus.
Right. So he
Got him.
ends up finding, Paul comes upon folks who've been taught by Apollos.
That
Because
makes it-
again,
okay.
at the end of 18, they send him on to Acacia, which is where Athens and Corinth is. That's that southern portion of Greece. And so they sort of, miss each other. Like they sort of, here's Ephesus. Paul's making his way to Ephesus, and then Apollos goes on to Acacia, and then Paul ends up in Ephesus. So it doesn't look like they're there at the same time. Now that's not to say that they weren't somewhere at the same time at some point, but he obviously has heard of him. So. Oh goodness, we are right at an hour. So let's okay, good, we're on the last thing. So obviously Apollos is well spoken, he knows his stuff. However, the verse 25 says, he taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John, so John the Baptist. So that means that he hadn't necessarily become a, it seems to intimate that he hasn't been baptized in the name of the Holy Spirit or baptized with the Holy Spirit. I'm going to defer on that one for right now. But Priscilla and Aquila come alongside of him and explain things more fully. They get like, all right, we hung out with Paul. Here's what he said, and so he, they push him on this. And notice that it's the way of God, and the way is capitalized. That's Jesus. Jesus is the way. So he, so the answer to the first question, why did Priscilla and Aquila need to give Apollos further instruction, is about that there's a baptism that happens, and it happens through the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what that's about. And so why was what he knew good but not good enough? That's my own phrase. And where have we seen this before in Acts? And so let me just, I'm trying to remember. Let's see. I'm trying to think if it was. Hold on. I had a specific answer when I wrote that question, and I can't remember what it is now.
It sure does. It sure does.
Man, I had, oh golly. I promise you, I had a thing in mind
I'm sure you did.
when I wrote that question, and now I can't think of it.
Not good enough.
There was another scene where I'm thinking there was another scene where somebody was preaching and converting people, and they hadn't heard of the baptism in the Holy Spirit.
Well, you can email it
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I know it's here somewhere. Okay, I will find that. Okay. Figure this out. I wrote that question, I don't know, 5 months ago. I've slept since then. Okay, so they pull him aside and explain to him way more accurately. He wishes to cross over to Acacia, so southern Greece, like where Athens and Corinth is, and they encourage him to go. And they even wrote, because remember, Priscilla and Aquila are there in Ephesus. They write a letter to go with him, sort of as the introduction to him, so that they will accept him, so that they will listen to him. That he's got his references, so to speak. On his arrival, he greatly helped those who through grace became believers, and he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by scriptures that the Messiah is Jesus. Sorry, it's not there in the book.
Got this.
Well, I mean,
So far, it's only an F and an is Jesus.
right. That's pretty good for a 250-page book. So
That's not bad.
although we're
not halfway yet.
about halfway in. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Very good. Okay. Any other questions y'all have? Anything I skimmed over that you might want to make sure your folks know about? I know we're running up on time. So.
This question's for Sandy more than anything else, I guess, and that is when you're doing the lesson for a particular week, are you only doing like in this example, chapter 18, or are you also doing Saturday, the start of 19?
Well, since it's happening 2 weeks in a row, I think we'll stop before we go into the next chapter. I think we'll leave the Saturday for the following week. Since you're not going to be preaching on it.
No, I won't talk about 19 until next weekend.
Yeah, where is your sermon this time?
It's verses 1 to 11.
1 through 11?
Yeah, so it's Saturday and Monday's reading. Up till when it says he stays there for a year and a half.
Are you going to bring up your comments earlier about how Paul's traveling seemed to emulate the Exodus as well as our lives? Yes,
I think that's going to be a bit of, I'll spend some time talking about that.
That makes sense.
I made mention of that before, obviously, when he got the sort of the redirection back in 16. I made mention of those moments where we get the vision and we get one step, and then we take that step and then we get another step. So it'll come back around to that. So yes, it's a good metaphor. There you go. All righty. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate everything. I hope that your groups go well. So you have a heads up, we're thinking about the potential, or I'm thinking about the potential of just doing online worship this coming weekend, just with all the weather stuff. We'll send out word in plenty of time. Hopefully no later than tomorrow, just to give everybody a heads up. I don't want any more people out on the road if it's going to be nasty. If we don't have to.
Have you gotten much feedback from the people that do attend on Sunday as far as they like it or just or not? Have they said anything about being there versus not being there?
No. I mean, other than people like the comments I've gotten are that people like to be together. As far as whether it's better than being online. That's, I don't get a whole lot of those. I do get folks who worship online and go, hey, we had some audio issues and we had some, things like that. So I'm like, yeah, we're still working on that. Sorry, we'll do our best.
Well, I can tell you that we have between 10 and 13 people at the first service each
Mhm.
Sunday,
Mhm.
and everybody to a person loves being able to be back in the church.
Sure.
Oh, we
Really?
miss it like crazy. It's I miss singing in the choir. I miss
Oh, I'm
being
sure.
there, but I sure don't want somebody going, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" and not till we get the second shot. You know.
Well, yeah, and in fact, what, 2 or 3 weeks after the second shot?
Well, that's true. That's true. It's probably going to be the end of March before I'm really, as far as they say, clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know.
All righty. Well, again,
Well, thank
thank
you.
you so much for what you do. Let me know
Okay.
if you have any issues or if you have any more questions.
All righty.
Have a great week.
Bye bye.
Thank you. You too.